pretty cute kid. She kills me. Look at it. Oh, you go first. Hang on. So make sure you don't miss it. Every book's looks like this in the back.
So this book, I love this quote from Sarah Jessica Parker calling this novel so beautiful and so painful and so gorgeously.
Sarah Jessica, I met her once. She took the ARC. I was like, is that in Bloomsbury ARC? I was like, yeah, you'll find a book. Then she texted me. I know, it was pretty good.
Kate Weinberg is the author.
That's pretty good.
In London, and Kiley Reid is the author of Such a Fun Name, which is a New York Times bestseller and won the prize. The writing has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Playboy,
Come and get it.
others.
No, they make sense. They don't come back.
So please join me welcoming Kate and
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for coming. I know baby girl is going to be okay. I'm so sorry. That is my little baby daughter, and she is so excited. She's been looking at Kate all week and saying, Kate, Kate. And so seeing her in the flesh is very interesting.
And now I've got legs.
Exactly.
And the whole bottom
You've
half.
got legs.
Yeah.
I want to start by saying congratulations on such a wonderful, heartfelt, somehow funny, despite the themes book. And here's my thing with the start of a book. I'm going to take you back to like 1990 something. There was this commercial on TV that had a very sexy woman going into an office and saying, I want you to design me a kitchen around this faucet. Does anyone remember this commercial? No? I feel like every woman was like, am I gay? This is so attractive. But I often find that with writing a book, you start with a faucet.
Yes.
And you build up the kitchen around it, and oftentimes you don't need the faucet anymore. So I would love to know, what was the spark, the faucet that created this, and did it make it into the book?
That's such a great question. So the spark, I guess spark is a funny word for this, because in 2020, during COVID, I did get a pretty hefty dose of long COVID and was knocked out by it and went to bed for 4.5 months. And during that time, I went in and out of this feverish state of semi-consciousness that I thought in my mind of as the pit. And while I was ill, I wasn't thinking of it yet as a book, but I did have this very strong vision of this idea of the pit in the book, which was this place of illness and also despair that somehow started to take this physical shape. And out of that, I suppose, I kind of got to a point where I thought, this is so miserable. I wonder if I can make something interesting and fun and lively out of it, and at the same time tell this story. And that challenge to me was really what got me started on the book and kept me going throughout, was how do I tell a story that people probably don't want to hear in a way that makes them really want to keep reading. And as soon as I got well enough, I started to write, and lots of weird and wonderful ideas came to me when I started writing.
Do you remember the first things that you put pen to paper on?
So in the book, there's a Renaissance ghost who is called Luigi de Porto, who's actually a real historical figure. That was a lifelong obsession of mine from my 20s when I lived in Verona. I became quite obsessed by this character and actually did a very bad piece of writing about it. And while I was ill, I remember thinking of it like illness, a little bit like a lost property office, because all these unresolved bits of my past kept on floating up into the sick room. And one of them was this character, Luigi. And I thought, I wonder if he can be, he didn't serve me at the time. And I feel like on some level, he's a little annoyed that he didn't get used properly. And I put all this time into thinking about him. Can he somehow get involved in this illness and turn it round and come as a sort of agitator that's going to help me break out of this sick room. And that's when I started thinking about the story less as this static idea of a girl stuck in bed and more like a prison break. And he was basically coming along to help me break free.
He gets very involved in this sickness in a wonderful way, and it feels like you've known him for a very long time. So that's not surprising at all. Yeah.
And I felt like he needed to get involved in the character's love life as well, because he comes straight from Verona. He was the original author of Romeo and Juliet, so I felt like he would have really strong views on Vita's love life, and indeed he does, as well as other things. He's very into certain snacks.
He's that friend who's not going to let you forget about all of the guys that
all
you've
the bad
dated
exes.
before.
Yeah. So he comes in and he has really strong views about the boyfriend that Vita has and the guy upstairs that she's got. There are romantic possibilities with this sexy neighbor upstairs, and Luigi is basically, telling her to move it along a bit and start getting involved with the guy upstairs.
He's got a really great voice that I read it and listened to the Audible. And the Audible, the person does a really great
She's amazing.
She's a really, really great job.
Yeah.
But I want to hear it from your voice as well. Do you think
Luigi's
you can
voice?
read? No, whatever you want to read for us. I'd love to hear
I'm just
some
not
from
sure
you.
I can do the Italian accent without it sounding really like a sort of Dolmio advert or something like that. So I'm going to read a couple of pages from the very start. So we're just going to start with Vita. Chapter 1, A Visitor. Let's start with some facts. On day 126, I moved Whitney Houston up to the end of my bed. Hold on, even that's not quite true. On day 126, I asked Max to move the bowl filled with water, multicoloured gravel, plastic coral, treasure chest, ruined archway, and Whitney Houston herself swimming in panic circles, and bring it sloshing up the 9 steps to the mezzanine, where he placed it at the end of our bed. Partly the goldfish move was for company, a cellmate of sorts. I'd only moved into Max's basement flat a couple of weeks before I got sick, so I'd barely unpacked before I began to spend long stretches of the day in bed alone. Max's hours at the hospital were relentless, and for weeks now, I'd stopped wanting visitors. But the main idea for having Whitney Houston join me upstairs was that when I feel myself getting sucked back into the pit, it would stop me thinking, something truly catastrophic is happening. The doctors won't tell me, but they think I'm stuck like this forever. Or rather, when I did think that, I'd catch sight of my golden fantail swimming blithely around her bowl and try to remember that this is how it always feels. The fact that I kept forgetting, this violent yo-yoing between thinking I was fine and thinking I was stuck forever, this odd etch-a-sketch memory, well, that was part of the sickness too. Sometimes it worked, sort of. When I felt the clamp tightening at the back of my skull, when I lost feeling in my fingers and toes, and the strange poisoned aches began to flood my system, I'd fix my gaze on Whitney's translucent tail wafting through the water and remind myself that this panic, this sense of doom that kept circling my brain like a fish in a bowl, that was just the illness speaking. Mostly, it didn't work. Because the dirty secret was that although I joked about 7-second memories and Jewish hypochondria, this whole episode had dragged on way too long to be funny. By now, everyone was frightened. My friends were frightened. My family was frightened. Even my boss sent orchids in an expensive ceramic pot. I saw it in Max's eyes too. At least, I thought I did. And when a doctor is frightened, you better start worrying. That's the problem with this story. So much is guesswork. There aren't enough hard facts. In the end, I did break free, even if I'm still trying to piece together from what. All I knew then was that I had to serve my time imprisoned by whatever sickness it was. Only thing was, no one would tell me how long. As the weeks gave into months, so much else blurred. Some days, it felt like only Whitney Houston was really there.
Very nice. Yeah. If I was teaching, I would talk about the effectiveness of that opening chapter of getting into the story and the story that's already happening. From knowing Max's profession to what's happening to her, it's incredibly effective on all
Thank you.
fronts.
You can if you want to.
I could, yes. So I want to talk about sickness for a tiny bit. The novel is really careful about remaining pretty vague in terms of what Vita is dealing with, and that's incredibly effective, and I think it seems really purposeful. There's a sentence where she lists things that it could be, and that's maybe one of the only times you hear about certain things like long COVID or a blood disease. What went into the decision of making that vague? And so for me, it made the life of a chronically ill person seem much more attainable, and it could be anyone you know. I wanted to know what went into that decision.
So basically that,
Yeah.
I wanted to broaden it out. And actually when, and I thought really hard about that because I went back and forth because obviously COVID's very topical and
Yeah.
there was some power in making it specific. But actually, the more I think about that time and the more I talk to people about experiences, both with illness and with mental health problems, because the illness sort of wraps your brain into it as well and it becomes quite entangled. What's your despair and what's the illness? I realized that actually there are lots of these situations in life, whether it's grief or heartbreak or some kind of mental health breakdown or one of these, there are plenty invisible illnesses like long COVID, where basically your life stops and you have some kind of reckoning and everything that's come before gets reevaluated and you start seeing things through a different lens. And I really wanted to make this seem not like a book that was about a certain type of illness, but really about what happens when time stops and your life is put on hold and you have to look at things differently again.
That's what happens for her completely. She's still herself completely, but then has these moments where she slips into this darkness that you can't, have a regular job and all of those things the same way that you could before. Something that happens often is Vita's past colors the way that people treat her current sickness. And it's interesting because some of the characters say very astutely that your body logs its wounds and holds on to that, but there's a big difference between that and, oh, well, she has a history. I'd love to know about any research or emotions that went into crafting how we view people's sickness based on their behavior as a person.
So, I mean, the reason I came up with the title, There's Nothing Wrong with Her, is that I really wanted to dig quite deeply into this idea of perception when it comes to both illness and mental health and what's in your head and what's not in your head, and particularly around women, of which there's been, most people will know, there's been centuries of women being either misdiagnosed or told that something is in their head or they're being neurotic. So I wanted to talk about that. But then it's more complicated than that, because I think there is, certainly in my experience, there's a nuance to this. I think if there are certain ways that your own character and nervous system and experience gets pulled into the way you react to your own sickness or any kind of problem that happens in your life, and you have to log that too. You have to get to grips with the fact that it's a very three-dimensional problem in order to get out of it.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of things that sickness brings up from the past because of the sickness, for better or for worse at the same time. I want to talk about process a little bit. I always have a feeling there's a lot of writers at events like
any writers here?
There's a lot of people who look like writers in here, I feel. So first question for you on process. Someone asked me this a while ago and I loved it. Are you a plotter or a plunger?
Oh, I love that. A bit of both,
Okay.
I'm afraid, to answer in a kind of on the fancy sort of way. I like to come up with certain ideas. I like to feel like I know where I'm going, but then I also like to surprise myself along the way. The thing that I have found over the years is the single biggest difference to the way I write is when I write in longhand versus when I write straight onto the computer. because when I write straight onto the computer, I think I'm always thinking about what you guys are thinking about my writing. And when I'm writing in longhand, I'm with myself, and I'm not imagining that reader, and that really helps.
I do the same thing. That feels like
Oh,
a
you
little
do?
diary. Yeah. Do you ever do a practice draft on your computer that doesn't count, and then when things are good, you move them into a real draft?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
No, but I do have a kind of offcuts folder.
There
which
you
is
go.
kind of
Yes,
similar.
completely.
And I always think, oh, I'm sure I'm going to use all those juicy offcuts, and obviously I never do.
You come back and you're like, what was I?
Yeah, what was I thinking?
Completely.
Yeah, totally.
Something.
So you're a longhand writer.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, I too had some health issues as well. That screens just did not become my friend after a while, and I think writing longhand is so much more sustainable, and it makes you listen a lot more when you have to actually write it out.
And how bad's your handwriting?
Terrible,
Yeah,
terrible.
It's really
But it's purposeful, because if anyone looks over, they can't tell what's going on.
Yeah.
Exactly. Something I talk with my students a lot about is when you sit down to write a scene and you say, okay, I'm going to do the dinner scene today.
Yeah.
And all you get done in a 4-hour period is getting everyone into a room.
room.
Yes, but some of your a lot of your characters don't have to walk in. They're already there.
Yes, that's true.
Sometimes they're just sitting at the edge of a bed. And I'd love to know the process and craft of writing people who are always there, but also not there.
So I have a lot of fun with my Luigi character, with my Renaissance ghost, because he basically can materialize. So I don't have to move him from A to B, and I don't have to worry about the mechanics of the plot. And similarly, having a goldfish who plays quite a big role in the book is also quite helpful, because she's there doing her thing, moving around and around. I did have to think quite a lot about how to get my character, who was in bed, involved with her upstairs neighbours, which is how the whole plot really gets going. Actually, this was inspired by an actual real life leak which happened in our house, and I thought, ooh, that's good. If there's a leak from above, then there's a really good reason. If she's the only one in the flat, then she is going to have to get out of bed and go upstairs. And so there's a mixture of practical, but that's true. I've realized in my next book I had quite a lot of luxury with just characters being around, and now I'm going to have to do getting people in and out of cars and all those.
Or not. I might
things.
steal some of your tactic too.
Yeah,
Getting
just
people in and out of a room is
materializing.
miserable. It's so awful. But yes, I also love that the music is something that joins them in between the walls a bit.
Exactly. And also I created that the house started to take a little bit of a life of its own, because the whole thing happens within one apartment block. So I thought, well, let's make use of that a little bit. And also she's in and out of this quite surreal state. So I gave the apartment to have it was a slightly magical realist feel. It was like, hang on a minute, is there something humming in the background? Are the walls do they have their own music? Do they have their own kind of way of existing with the city that you're able to think of when you're in this state of heightened reality?
I think that's a thoughtful thing towards the reader here, because of course we want to highlight the reality of being chronically ill. At the same time, like, we understand, like, as a reader, like, reading something like just a woman in her bed for 400 pages, it's just not going to work out. And so bringing these other people and making the walls come alive, I think, was really effective.
So what I wanted to do was just like set up, here's a character who is sick, but then just put it in the landscape, and basically then have all the rest of the plot happening, and all the relationships and the romantic possibilities and the mystery in the past, but actually, rather than it being more static because she was ill, actually more heightened, because when you're in a situation where you can't distract yourself and you can't go off to your job, everything gets kind of packed in and heightened and intensified.
I'm a big fan of trapping characters in a way.
Exactly.
I'd love to know what characters presented themselves to you first, and if their names always remained the same.
Oh, that's a good one. So my main character is called Vita, and that means Italian. It's Italian for life, and that always felt like a good idea in terms of the fact that the whole journey is her coming back to life, and like I said, I wanted it to feel like she was a very dynamic character despite the circumstances. Luigi Deporto is a real historical figure, and I was slightly annoyed by the fact he's called Luigi, which is because it's a slightly preposterously Italian name, and I was like, could it be something sort of less central casting? But you know, I'm stuck with that. Max the Doctor, I don't know how I came up with Max.
Fits him very well, though.
But he's a Max, you know. He's kind of someone who does incredibly well in his career, and he kind of, you know, he does everything to the max. So maybe that's why I thought of that. I just tend to think of characters that I like, and then names that I like, and often I'll create a bit of a nickname because that instantly makes you feel that they've got a backstory, because whoever's given them a nickname means that they must have existed before they walked onto the page.
Yeah, completely. This goes very nicely into one of the names that for some reason feels very perfect is Gracie.
Yes.
And this is definitely a book about a lot of things, but also a book about sisters and family. And one of my favorite things about the sisters here is that they will be in a full-on fight, and then they will just stop it to literally go for like a donkey ride or finish a crossword puzzle and not get to the heart of that fight, which I think is incredibly human. I'd love to know about what it was like to put these sisters on the page and what you were trying to accomplish there.
So one of the things that, obviously we're talking about ways to make the book dynamic, even though she's in the present day stuck in bed. So a lot of the book takes place in the past, and it's with this character these sisters who, there's a mystery to why one of the sisters who she gets on so well with is not present in her everyday life, and a lot of the book is driven by the fact that you're trying to find out what has happened in this very intense relationship. But yes, everything in the past happens in one day, and the intensity of their relationship was something that I experienced a lot in my life with my sisters, and I wanted to, in a way, it's the kind of heart of the book, it's the emotional core of the book, and I care about those scenes almost more than any other scenes in the book.
Yeah, I completely agree. Those scenes were just very human, and their fights felt like they had history to them, like they've almost had them many times before, and just really believable, and a really...
They're very competitive about the crossword, for example.
Super competitive, yes. I'd love to know about the challenges with this book. I feel that you often set out to write a book and think, oh, this is going to be the hard part, and it's something completely different. What were the hard parts here?
So when I wrote my first novel, The Truants, my husband, who's a brilliant reader, read it and got to the end of it and said, I love this book, but you're not really very interested in men, are you? And actually I found the male characters much harder to write than the female characters. But I guess this was the same in this book as well. The main male character is a doctor, and that's no accident. It's about Vita's relationship with the medical world and how they view what's going on, whether it's in her head or whether it isn't. And I had to really think carefully about making sure that he wasn't a villain. I wanted to portray him in the way that I felt about the medical establishment, which was this very nuanced feeling of they're trying to get on the front foot about the kind of mind-body link, and the science is moving that way too, and there were lots of sympathetic doctors that I experienced, but there was a defensiveness and a kind of black and white thinking in that world. And so I tried to put all of that nuance into the dynamic between Max and Vita, and that was really hard to do. So I spent a lot of time rewriting that.
Yeah. Did writing this book illuminate anything new about the medical world that you hadn't thought about before when you were actually in it?
I think it was more that I wanted to portray the whole spectrum of it, and that I didn't have this view, I didn't have this massive argument with, there was misogyny in some of the kind of experiences that I'd had around my diagnosis, etc. But there was also a huge amount of sympathy and intuition from other doctors, and I wanted to make sure that all those colors were in it.
That reads completely. And I think that if you had gone in with like a polemic argument, it wouldn't be such a heartfelt book as it is. It's kind of like all of those things exist, but her sickness is happening. So it's like, it's all in the, like, what does it matter? You know, her life is first.
And I wanted actually people to walk away thinking Max is a really great guy, and wait, is this Vita's kind of, is she not ready for him? Or, you know, I wanted it to be a kind of that you could have a totally different reading, that one person could feel that actually maybe Vita wasn't ready for Max, and another person could feel that Max had not really been thoughtful enough about her. And, you know, that's something that really matters to me when I'm writing, that actually you can go away with a different interpretation, and that the book doesn't close down by the end so that everyone knows what's happened and everyone knows what they think about the characters, but you can walk away with radically different views of your characters. And
that's what I want as well. I hate when a book tells me what to think. Yeah. I want to say,
well, yours don't.
Oh,
Yours
good. I would love to know, was there anything from this book, with any research you did, from Luigi to sickness, what's something that you know now that you can't believe you know because of writing this book? Was there anything that you learned along the way?
What that emerged because of the book?
Yeah.
That's such a good question.
I did not know a lot about Romeo and Juliet until I read this book. And that was really
okay.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, that was something which was, it was fun to revisit, but I did know before that actually this character, Luigi de Porto, had written this short novella that was Romeo and Juliet, and Shakespeare had basically nicked it. And Luigi's love life, which had actually been, he'd been madly in love with this woman who had betrayed him, and he had written Romeo and Juliet, essentially, it seems, to basically say that's how women should behave when they're really in love. I can't believe you didn't do that. It blew my mind that the most famous love story of all time was actually based on this, basically the equivalent of kind of hate mail or something. You know, this kind of incredibly, this betrayal was fueling what's considered now to be, you know, the sort of ultimate love story. So that wasn't something that I learnt along the way, but it was something that I looked at in a very different light when I was reading it, when I was writing it, to when I was thinking about it when I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah. Did you get to visit Italy at all to make any of this even
well,
more crisp?
annoyingly, because I had already spent a lot of time in Verona in my 20s, I didn't quite feel I was justified to go back. But I did get to kind of, the famous bottom drawer that all writers have with all the really shit writing in it, I did get to spend quite a lot of time rifling through and kind of going, ooh, maybe I can actually make use of this really bad piece of writing and, you know, make good on that.
Yes, let that one never be seen, but this new one that's inspired.
Exactly. Like, no one needs to see that one, and now I can pretend that I always knew I was going to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
You and I are very similar as writers in that we want to do something new every time. How was the journey of turning to a more personal, crafty story after your first book, The Truants?
A personal, what was the word?
I think it's like a crafty, like,
right.
very like elevated language story.
Yes.
That is full of plot, but also very much inside one woman's head, which is very different from The Truants.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think I was going to write that book, and so that book kind of happened to me, and then I had to take hold of it and make sure that there was a story in it that I really would hold people, and whereas it was sort of the other way around with the first book. I thought, let's come up with a story that everyone wants to hear, and let's kind of write the kind of book that I would want to read. So it's sort of a reverse thing, and so I'm quite intrigued about what's going to happen next. I don't know which way I'm going to go, really. I've got some ideas for my third novel, but am I going to be as sort of classically plot driven as I was in my first book, or am I going to go more into that sort of more interior character driven world of my second? And hopefully I can find a sweet spot somewhere in the middle.
I'm sure you can. Yes. I have a few more that are very selfish, and Perhaps
Yes,
silly
go.
me. What's your favorite Whitney Houston song?
Okay, this is so embarrassing. I don't know, I can say this out loud. The greatest love of all.
Oh, it's so sweet though.
Okay, all right.
It's so sweet. Wait, is
Yeah.
this? No, yes. Oh, yes, I do know.
Yes, you do know.
Okay, yes.
It's the really cringy one.
It's just, it's like, it
I
ends a
can't-
movie. It's like a plain movie song. Kind of. I love I Have Nothing. That's the one in the shower. That's always the one for
When
me.
she kind of gets really emphatic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Was Whitney Houston always Whitney Houston in
Yes.
this book? Yeah? Wow.
So Whitney Houston's the goldfish for people who haven't read the book. She's called Whitney Houston. And actually the reason that she was called Whitney Houston in my mind was because I was trying to think of a name for a goldfish, and she is a sort of version of Vita that's circling the bowl through the book. And I thought, what's the most inappropriate name that I can give her? And for some reason, the song I Want to Dance with Somebody kept on coming into my mind. So the idea of this sort of fish that was silently humming to herself as she went round the bowl came to mind, and then I stuck with it.
That's it. But she follows the book in such a really wonderful way. And it makes me want to put a fish on my writing desk. And I would love to know what's on your writing desk. What is it? If you have like the most perfect writing day
Yes.
you can think of, what does
Yes.
that situation look like for you?
Probably less clutter than is normally on my desk, but then quite a long view. Like if there's a short view, then I'll get really distracted and I'll start kind of following what's going on with the couple that are sitting on the bench on the other side of the street, and I'll stop writing and I'll get involved with them. But if there's a really long view, then I can kind of I can dream while I'm looking at it.
Yes, yes, yes.
What about you?
Oh man, for me it's about the timing. If I had my way, I would write at the same time
Yes, but
every
you
day.
don't.
I never do.
No.
There's always an appointment or someone's
Yeah,
sick or
yeah.
always those things. But just I have a very, very boring office in a medical office that I just work, and there's nothing in there. There's nothing on the walls, no music, anything. Yeah.
But you know the timing thing, there are certain writers that will always say I work between this time, and then I have my lunch, and then I go off, and then I do an hour's editing in the afternoon. And I think you probably have to face up to the fact you're never going to be one of those writers.
Never,
and
never.
Then you'll probably always feel a slight sense of failure because you're not, but it's not going to happen.
You get it done. Yeah, I bring up index cards in my purse, and if I'm in the waiting room or whatever,
You start.
yeah, I just make sure that I can keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was 2 more that I have for you. Bear with me. I want to ask you so many more things. After writing this book, what is the worst thing that you could say to someone with a chronic illness? It's the worst.
Are you feeling better?
Oh.
So the word better has always been, I guess that's something I learnt in the writing, was quite how much I hate, that word, and fatigue. Fatigue is a really annoying word if you're chronically ill, because just to divert onto fatigue for a moment.
Please.
Fatigue has become this word that everyone associates with COVID, and especially with long COVID. And actually, if you're really sick, what you feel like is that you've got a full body poisoning, and the idea that you've got fatigue, like a sort of Jane Austen heroine that's sort of swooning after a long walk, or seeing a handsome man, is really irritating. And then better, I think there's so much. When you're ill, people just want to know that you're improving, and they feel better if you say you're feeling better. And when you're chronically ill, you're up and down, but you mainly feel like you're stuck. And this word better can feel like a sort of pressure, like, be a good girl and feel a little better for me.
Better, yes.
Or spin your experience slightly so that I feel less uncomfortable about how stuck you are.
Right.
God,
right.
That came out quite emphatically, didn't you, when you said?
Are you
what
doing that?
annoys you?
There's this specificity in the language there that is quite annoying. Where it's like, make this easier for me.
Yes,
please.
And I think the fatigue is the same. It's a sort of minimizing, and it sort of puts it into a register that people feel is not too shocking or too. And I think that in the end, you just have to listen rather than try and direct the conversation. It's like a sort of barrister with a leading question.
Right.
You need to make sure you're not doing that.
Yeah, I do recall when I had some health issues as well and could not look at screens. I recall telling people that was the situation, and they would say, "Oh yeah, I totally get it." And sometimes I turn off my phone for a few hours because my head, and it was just feeling like I don't know how to tell you, like I cannot do my professional job anymore, and how do I make you understand that? But the process of making you understand that will make us not friends anymore. So I can't do that with you. And there's someone, I believe her name it stuck out to me, was Jenny in this book, that just wants to shoo that away. Did it illuminate anything for you, or did you feel happy to do this rendition, or depressed about people not being able to contend with sickness?
I think it's just people, for me, I mean, sickness is one thing, but it's actually, there are certain people in life who I just find can't bear things. Like they can't bear a certain amount of discomfort, whether you're talking about something emotionally that's uncomfortable, or something in your past, or something in their own relationship. And, sickness is one of them.
Yeah.
And there are so many people that you feel are trying to kind of stuff things back into Pandora's box and make them, so that they don't feel so distressed by whatever it is. And in a way, getting ill for a long period of time, it's like an X-ray on those people who find certain emotions really uncomfortable. And it is often people who find introspection uncomfortable. Emotions of some kind.
And it stinks because once you see that side, it's hard to go back.
It's really hard to go back, and there are lots of people that I really, love and am very fond of, but I now know that they can only go so far. And there's sort of there's a barrier where there's a kind of big sign that says, don't make me feel any more uncomfortable, and please don't come past here. And you just have to accept that and then kind of recalibrate a little bit in terms of that dynamic.
Lots of recalibration. Yes. I've asked way too many questions. I want to wrap up in a second. I have one last one, but I also want to say before I ask my last one, yes, this is a book about chronic illness, but there's a lot of very sexy men in this book as well. So you should remember that. Some of them are British, some are American, and they're wonderful. So if that's your read, this is your bag as well. But Kate, my last question for you before I wrap up and let everyone else ask questions. What's the best thing you can say to someone when they're sick?
I think it's really about staying in the here and now with them, which is, how's your day, how is today, rather than trying to kind of get a sense, like we were talking about, of the narrative of where they are, just sticking exactly where they are.
That's great.
And not trying to kind of force them into a future that is better.
Yeah. I think I would apply that to not just sickness, but a lot of other...
Like writing novels.
Exactly. Yeah. How's your novel going?
Have you nearly finished? Yeah, it's exactly the same question.
Yes,
really,
completely.
It?
Just how's it today?
There's a great I can't remember what it was. It's probably a New Yorker cartoon or something where one character is saying to another, "So I hear you're writing a novel." Me neither.
Me neither is right. I never ask about writing in that way. Does anyone have any questions for Kate about her process?
Or for Kiley?
Anyone? Yes? No? I thought I saw a hand. Of course.
So when you wrote about your illness, you're obviously writing from your personal experience, but was there any other writings out there about chronic illness or COVID, either fiction or nonfiction, that you looked to or really admired?
Thanks for the question. So I loved the novel Sorrow and Bliss that came out a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if anyone here has read that. And she was also very non-specific about the illness in it, and there was a lot of humor in it, which was I found very inspiring. Like, actually, if you're going to tackle a subject like this, make sure you make it funny. And then there are some classic books or short stories like The Yellow Wallpaper, and other novels that aren't necessarily about sickness but happen in small compressed places. I've always loved that feeling of actually the kind of locked room feeling where you know, everything is compressed and heightened and, you know, about to blow. So a mixture of sickness and sort of cabin fever novels, I'd say.
Anyone else? Yes.
So I haven't had the pleasure of reading your work yet. I'm looking forward to it, and
Thank you.
I love your work very much.
Oh, thank you.
And I was wondering if, so it's a question for both of you,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to allow yourselves to be jealous of each other's abilities as writers,
What a great question.
That's brilliant.
so what would you steal from each other? Like, what are you
Oh.
jealous about, either in terms of like substance, theme, or style and form, like anything?
Okay, that is a great question. Also, I'm remembering I have to recite the questions for the people on live right now. And the wonderful question is, what would we be jealous of each other of
Such a
in
good
terms
question.
of
I
each
mean,
other's
everything?
writing? Everything I
Yeah.
feel. Yes.
I mean, I love your dialogue. I totally love your dialogue. And I think you're really good at, this is just such a nerdy conversation now, but staying in the scene.
Oh, thank you.
I think you stay in the scene. Sometimes I'm like, everyone's going to get disinterested. I'm going to just jump out and try something else. And I think you're really good at staying in it.
This is so funny. Mine is like the same, but on the other coin, I feel like you get into a scene very nicely. I think that I do a lot of throat clearing sometimes that I have to go back and forth with. But I feel like you know exactly where your beginning should be in a very clear way that it just seems like very clairvoyant on your part. I also feel like you take risks that I think I'm a little bit scared to take, but turn out really wonderfully. And you do the thing that's really nice that authors do where they combine research and history in a way that's not boring at all, where you can tell that like this person actually cares about this thing. This person isn't trying to like make me understand that they're smart and suddenly I'm interested in, and they're approaching me in a really accessible way that makes me feel smarter for having read it. So Kate's a beautiful writer, and she's a beautiful friend too, so it's a nice thing that we have going on here.
Kylie, also I have to say one more thing, even though this is going to sound, I am really jealous the way you write small children.
Oh,
Where's Annie?
thanks. I know she's outside having a time.
Oh no! It's so funny the way
thank
you
you.
write, and I know that you've got more of that in you. So I love that, and it makes me immediately want to go and start recording toddlers, because they are the funniest.
They are the
funniest people alive,
They
and they
are.
are great to write into books.
And something that's, I know this is not my turn, but something I want to talk about too is a lot of my students would talk about being, my students would literally say to me, do you like regret having children?
Yes.
Because it takes you away from writing, and what has that done for you? And I think that both Kate and I really appreciate the way that our children have like illuminated our writing a bit. And it's really nice to talk to Kate as a mom as well, and how children can take away your time but make your writing like a lot richer. So
the reverse of the kind of pram in the hall, you know, the syndrome, which is like when the pram's in the hall, that you are at your most banal as an artist. Actually, for me, it often gave me lots of mini deadlines as well as the emotional stuff, which is just like, you better get this done because someone needs you at the other end of it. Whereas sometimes when you have the luxury of a big yawning day, you can find yourself doing a million things before you actually sit down.
Before I had children, if I came back from a trip, it would take me days to unpack my suitcase. Days. It would just be sitting there, and I would like be living out of it in my house. What am I doing? But then now that I have a child, I'm like, oh, I better get that done in 10 minutes. And that's how I feel about writing now as well.
True.
For sure. And that's something I
good
learned from
the
Kate.
short chunks really help.
I completely agree. Other questions here? Yes.
I love reading about covers.
Oh, covers.
Me too.
I'm so curious. Actually, both of you for coming at it, and with this one, I love that the goldfish is on it. How did these covers evolve?
The question here is about book covers and how they evolved. You go first. Yes, I love
By
this
the way,
a
can
lot.
you do this in live? Can you always
I know, I
repeat
kinda-
things to me? And I
I
really
feel like a
that.
translator. I kind of like it.
You go first.
Okay. I'm what they call a high touch author when it comes to the
Does that
cover.
mean you're really intrusive?
I'm really intrusive, and it has to be perfect. With Come and Get It, I wanted the a feral feeling almost, kind of like with the title. The title had been Suey for as long as I could remember, and everyone hated it. Everyone was like, you can't. And I would say to people Suey, and they would say Shooey. They couldn't get it.
Yeah.
And then one day my agent said, well, what does Suey mean? It means like, here, pig, come and get it. And there was something a little electric in that, and I wanted the cover to have that as well. And so I have a wonderful team, and I brought a deck, like I presented a deck to the team there. No one asked me to do that, but I just brought in everything that I thought was like really like the feel of the book, which was a bunch of vintage logos from Arkansas and mountaineering fonts and old classic covers. And they came back with lovely stuff that we all, fought over for a few days. I loved the green. I thought it was really electric. I liked the movement of the pig. It was my idea to put the little snout on the side. That was my little trait on there. But it was just a lot of back and forth. But we ended with a cover that I love it. It's a really incredible font with a pig with lots of motion. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with my cover. Yeah, what about you?
So I'm really interested about the fact that English covers and American covers are so different, and what that says to you about how similar we think English and American people are, but actually they're, not at all. And so my English cover for this novel couldn't be. It's a very graphic, big title, character in bed where she's just a teeny tiny person at the top of the cover itself, just peering over the sheets. And then this one is Whitney Houston and Vita lying on her back in a bowl. There was a lot of collaboration over this one too, and I love the idea of it started off with her without the goldfish bowl, so she was just lying on her back, and the back and forth was what happens if we put her in the goldfish bowl, and then what happens if she's I had the idea of like what about if she's blowing bubbles rather than Whitney, and it's fun. It definitely feels like it does feel like a conversation. I fear that I may be a high touch author as well.
It's your name on there forever. And you have to love it. I love that she looks like a bit of like you propped her in there, like a castle or something.
Yes, exactly. She's a bit of the fish furniture.
Yeah. But I will say, if you were an author in here and you get a book deal and they say, hey, here's this cover for you, you can say, can I see something else? You can always say, can I see something else? And I met an author who showed me a book in a bookstore and said, see that cover? My publisher tried to push that cover off on me. They're just like swapping them around. That does not have to be you. You can say, can I see something else? And it's someone's job to say, okay, let's give a few more options, and it's your book forever. So get what you want. Yeah,
it's true.
I'll get off that soap stand, but it's important. Yeah. Any other questions here for Kate about writing, about living in London? Anyone else? Yes.
Yes. So you talked about what inspired the story, how the process was therapeutic and creative. How did you feel once you finished the book?
It's such a mixture of feelings when you finish a book. There's, God, I don't know who said, I can't remember who said you never finish a book, you never finish a novel, you just abandon it, because actually you can keep on playing with it and writing another draft. I really knew where I wanted to get to in this book, and so there was a really obvious sense of what that last page would feel like and look like. And so when I got there, it was quite an exciting feeling. Whereas in my first novel, I was like, hang on, do I want to change the tone of that a little bit? So yeah, there was a really a great sense of completion, by which I didn't mean that I wasn't going to then spend a year messing around with a book. But that somehow the end point was something emotionally I wanted to get to. So it was a really exciting feeling, actually. What about you?
Finishing a book? I was thinking of the James Baldwin quote too. There's the book you set out to write and the one that you end up with too. It's I've never felt like, like when you try on a wedding dress, you're looking for like the this is it feeling. I never got that. I feel like you never get that with the book either, because the book stays the same, but you're changing as an author all
As
the
you
time.
write it, yeah.
And then later, you know, talking to authors, or if someone emails me saying like, "Oh, you put the name Arnetta in your book, and that's my mom's name," I'm like, oh, "I did it." You know, there's like moments of like feeling final, but I think
Yes.
that as a creator, you're never really finished in a good way.
But
So-
there are some, I mean, I'm slightly haunted by the fact that, is it Scott Fitzgerald who said, you know, this is about the Great Gatsby, that this is a perfect novel. I feel like, you know, maybe this is unfair on male writers, but I definitely feel like there is never going to be a female writer who says this is the perfect novel about it. But no, but I mean, that might be unfair. Maybe just that Scott Fitzgerald was just, you know, he knew.
That's it. That's it. Maybe he knew. Maybe,
Yeah.
and maybe, I haven't given up on women yet. There might be another women that
Yeah.
knows soon. But this
Yeah.
is a nearly perfect novel too. It's so fun. I never read books twice, and I read this one twice. It's really, really beautiful. Congratulations.
Oh, thank
and
you
yeah,
so much.
of course, give it for Kate. Yeah.
And for Kylie, thank you so
Of
much.
course,
It
of course.
was so
It was
lovely to
lovely.
speak to
Yeah.
you.
Quick announcement.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much. This was so lovely. Thank you to all of you for coming. We are going to start the signing line right here. Kate is going to come right to where my coworker Alexa is pointing, and I'm going to bring her right over. And I know you all want to meet her. You can meet her right there. And thank you so much for coming. Down the space. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's so lovely. Now I just want to hang out. Oh.